this evening we have Hicham Yezza, who is a writer and activist. He is the editor since 2003 of Ceasefire magazine, for which he's very kindly brought a few copies for people to peruse if they would like to. And it's a magazine that looks at both political and cultural issues. And he's also a founding member of the Nottingham Peace Movement, which is associated with Nottingham University, for which he is also a former student and staff member. But this evening he's here to talk about his part of his experience at the hands of the British state and their anti-terrorist legislation, as well as their immigration law. So with that, I'll just hand over to Hicham.
Thank you. I think what I'll do, first of all, thank you to the Oxford Libertarian Society for inviting me, and thanks to everyone here for taking the time to come and hear me speak. And the way I'd like to do it is I'll speak for 15-20 minutes. I'll try and keep it to as little as short as possible, just setting the context, and then hopefully we'll have more time in the Q&A to address maybe topics that you want to maybe ask about or discuss. My name is Hicham. For many, many years I've been a member of the University of Nottingham, both as a student for doing a PhD and both in undergrad studies, and a member of staff. In 2008, May 14th, was the day I was off work, and I had a call in the morning from a friend of mine. And the friend was a student who sort of was studying in the same building where I was working, which is the main building of the university called the Trent Building. I had an office which was just above the Vice Chancellor's office, and the friend called me and asked if I was okay, and I assumed it was to do with my illness. I had a mild flu, and I said I was fine, and I said why, and he said because there's lots of police officers outside and inside your office, and you know, you can imagine what your reaction would be to such an announcement. Now, for me, the decision was very easy to make. The first thing I did was just get dressed and go to work and see what the situation was. In fact, I remember saying on the phone, it's probably a break-in. And my worry at the time was simply, I hope they haven't taken any computer equipment that had lots of files and documents that I needed for work. And also, my office had a significant part of my book collection, and I was very concerned whether any would be missing. So I got there, and on arrival, I was approached by somebody dressed in plain clothes, and asked if I was a student. And then I asked them who they were, and they produced a police ID, and then they asked me to confirm my ID. I showed them my staff card, and then they immediately called other colleagues of theirs, and they informed me that I was under arrest. I was handcuffed. This is in the car park of a fairly large building. In other words, this is in plain sight of pretty much anyone who happened to be around the building that morning, or in the building but looking from the windows. And considering the massive police presence around the building, it was a fair number of colleagues and people who knew me. Was arrested, put into a police car and taken to a police station. Of course, my reaction would be quite similar, I'd imagine, to the reaction of pretty much everyone in this room. Were you to be presented with the same scenario, it was just complete bafflement. And trying to understand and try and guess what on earth could have possibly led to this. I found myself thinking about things that, completely unrelated and to do with things that happened 10, 15 years ago, to do with my student activism, and thinking that couldn't possibly, this is just silly. Got to the station, and then immediately was told that I was to be arrested. I was to be kept in the station until I was to be interviewed. And my assumption was that this is a matter of half an hour, maybe an hour. And I said, can you please make sure you do it quickly, because I've got a meeting at 1 o'clock. And this is the sort of setting the mindset that I had at the time about the seriousness of what I was in. I was put into a cell. I had 2 officers guarding my cell, and the door had to be open for the first 24 hours, as I discovered. But at the time, I didn't realise things would take on so long. I then was introduced to a couple of officers from the counter-terrorism unit who said they'd be coming to give me an interview later and informed me that it's very unlikely I would be making this meeting or any other meetings in the immediate future, that I was expected to be held in detention for at least a couple of days. And I was told that I was not able to contact anyone. My first worry was to say, can I speak to my parents, just in case I don't want them to get the news from anyone else, because they live abroad, they live in Algiers, they don't speak English. I don't want them to get news that might be confusing and upsetting and distressing. I'd like to give them a warning. And they said, we can't, sorry. And this is an interesting part of it, because the reason why they couldn't is because they didn't have any translators. They just needed somebody to be able to, and the argument they gave was, you could be given secrets to somebody like an accomplice or whatever, encoded language in another language. That if you were a terrorist or somebody involved in terrorism, this is your opportunity. However, they did allow me to speak to friends. I mean, they gave me just like the option of one number to call, which I did to try and get, with somebody from the university that I knew, to try and get the word out. And they said, and the reason they allowed me was because somebody could hear it on the other line. An officer could hear it, and it was in English. I'll get back to why this is important, hopefully, in the Q&A. So I'm there. I'm waiting. I'm being interviewed 10 hours later, 10 p.m. I was arrested at 10 in the morning. Very angry because I had a day wasted. This is obviously silly. There's no reason for me to be arrested. This is a mistake. They got the wrong person, the wrong name, the wrong, it's obviously a very, very serious misunderstanding. And to me, it seemed to be just a matter of when I'll be released and not whether, not if. And then I was told that the reason I had been arrested was the presence on my office computer of this document called the Al-Qaeda Training Manual. Now I'd like to set the scene for why that document was on my office computer. I've been in the university for many years, and part of the things I did, apart from being a student, was I was an activist for many years, and I was an editor of Ceasefire since I found it in 2003. And through my involvement, I had somehow become, a lot of people would come to me for advice on, things, politics or culture or literature even. And one of them, a friend of mine called Rizwan, came to see me and said, I'm doing an MA in politics and I'm planning to do a PhD. Can I come to see you and discuss my thesis? And I said, fine. So he came to see me, and then he said, I'd like you to help me draft my proposal for my PhD. And I said, that's fine. The PhD was on radical Islam, as was his MA. And then started, this was a few months prior to my arrest, and over the next few months, we used to meet. I used to give him advice, correct his drafts, edit his ongoing draft and the work he was doing. And at the same time, he used to send me whatever research material he was using, mostly academic papers, but also this particular document, which he had himself downloaded because on the reading list for his module, one of his modules, was a particular website that is a US governmental website under the Department of Justice. And on the declassified open source documents they had on there, so a document that is made available to scholars and researchers and to the wide public, was this document, which has no operational, if you read it, you'd be like, it's literally sort of mind-boggling how silly the whole thing is, the document itself. So that was one of the things he had come across and consulted and sent to me, saying, as part of lots of other documents. So I explained this. I said exactly to what I just said to you, to the officers. I said, "Can I go now? Like, this is," and there was very ample evidence in terms of communications, in terms of emails between me and Rizwan, the person in question, clarifying and confirming this. Him saying, in an email, "I'm sending you this document," as many other documents. And he's saying thanks, keep up the good work. What happened then was what really sort of is related to the wider topic of what I'm talking about today, which is unlawful detention, but also the wider remit of civil liberties in general, and what happens when the state tries to use the fear factor to try and target civil liberties. Because instead of the normal reaction, which would be to release a person or to sort of wind down the investigation, the opposite happened. I mean, I made it clear to them everything that I had done at university. I was very cooperative. I told them about everything I did with Ceasefire, all the activism I had done, my involvement with the peace movement. And then I discovered that pretty much everything that I thought was a positive was seen as a negative in their view. They were seeing, I started seeing an alarming tendency for me to be questioned about things that, to my eyes, were very clear indications that there was nothing to fear. For example, I had this very lengthy questioning about books I read. And it's not books about politics or anything. I mean, we're talking literature, we're talking fiction. Through my editorship of Ceasefire, I often conduct author interviews. One of them was with the Booker Prize-winning novelist Kazuo Shigeru, and we had pictures taken at the interview. And one of those pictures I was interviewed about it, and I was asked why I had pictures taken with this guy, and the implication being that I had some sinister motives behind interviewing him. And I started being really alarmed at the fact that there seemed to be, because of the nature of who I was, somebody who was a Muslim with a Muslim name, with clearly not a very sort of standard profile, a lot of things that would be seen as commendable in a normal person were seen as suspects in my case. And on top of that, I realised that because the arrest obviously was a big operation in Nottingham, obviously had a lot of media exposure, obviously there was a lot of expectation from it. The fact that they had caught the wrong people, because Rizwan was arrested too, and had to admit it publicly, and there was a lot of anger within the university community at the fact that the police had made the arrests without even giving myself and Rizwan the chance to explain. But also the university authorities had reported the case to the police in contravention of their own regulations and the government regulations that say try and first make sure this is a legitimate case of possessing the document. And I realised that what was happening was, from trying to figure out the truth, the police and the counter-terrorism unit became more interested in trying to find a way of getting us convicted and getting us charged, which is a very different thing. In other words, instead of looking for whatever truth there was, with no clear interest in either way, the person is innocent or guilty, none of their business as long as it's the truth. It became more, if they are charged, that's a good outcome. If they're not charged, that's a failure. And what happened was, over the next 6 days, my entire life was put under the microscope. Anything I had done, I'm part of a theatre and dance company, and we had lots of shows where I was both acting and dancing, and a lot of the footage, pictures from the rehearsals and the shows were put to me, and I was asked to explain them. I do a lot of cartooning, and a lot of my cartoons, in very surreal moments, I was asked to explain what the cartoons were and explain what, I can give you examples later in the Q&A, and so on. And things like photography, pictures I'd taken, magazines that had nothing to do with anything to do with politics. I was asked to explain why I had read them or why I subscribed to them. I was asked why I went to book festivals. And then after 6 days, they had to release us because the judge who had authorized them to detain us for 6 days said that that's it. 6 days. If you can't find any evidence, you have to release them. So they did. Now Rizwan left, but when I was released, I did not get any apology or anything. I just got a piece of paper saying you were found with this document. If you were found to possess it again, there might be an attempt to arrest you, which might lead to you being charged, which might lead to you being convicted. But that said nothing. It was just a bunch of tautologies. But interesting enough, I was arrested again on the spot by another team from the immigration services. And I said, what's going on here? And they said, well, we believe there's issues with your visa. And I said, well, surely, you can just send me a letter, or we can, you can talk to my solicitors, and they said, no, I'm afraid we have to keep you here. Well, then I wasn't very happy, and I said, fine. So I was kept in the station for a couple of more days. I spoke to my solicitor, and then I was transferred from Nottingham Police Station to an immigration detention centre. And this is where the real story begins, because I discovered very quickly that far from my detention being just a temporary measure before sort of sorting the confusion, or before releasing me while the case was being looked at, I was scheduled to go on the first plane out of the country to Algeria. And the first available plane was on the 1st of June, which was a week away. And to put this in perspective, this is like you missing out a credit card payment and then within an hour finding a bulldozer outside your house that will raise your house. This is a sort of, in terms of the legal terms that we're talking about, the reaction and the action, the enforcement action, how the enforcement compares to the alleged, I mean, on the Home Office's own terms, the alleged offence. And then we sort of realised what the game was, because immediately I was able to contact and be in touch with people who I knew in Nottingham, including people who were in touch with my MP, Alan Simpson, and everyone knew what was happening, because of the nature of the media coverage, because of the pressure on the police and the counter-terrorism unit to explain themselves. They had used something that had been using for decades, they still use to this day, which is to try and find a way of using immigration laws to basically cloud someone in guilt, or in the whiff of guilt, in order to justify a botched counter-terror operation. It wasn't the first time they did it, and I don't think it will be the last, unfortunately, unless we do something about it. So over the next few months, there was a very long, protracted battle against the Home Office. They did everything they could. They did threaten me in the beginning. They gave me the option. They said, if you leave the country now, we drop all charges against you, and basically you're scot-free, you can go. And I knew that the choice would be very hard, because on the one hand, I would have nothing on my passport that would prevent me from coming back. So the cost of it would simply be that image of being guilty. Accepting to leave would simply say to the world that I agreed with them, that there was some sort of guilt associated with it, and therefore they would be able to say the operation was a success. Fine, it wasn't on the terms that we had initially sort of undertaken it under, but there was something to it. I refused. I was told that it would take. That I risked up to 14 years in jail, and I knew that was a very hard decision, especially for my parents and my family. And I thought, well, this is one of those moments where you have to make a decision. And I thought, okay, I'm going to fight this. When it comes to immigration, this is doubly hard, because the people you're fighting are the people who make the decisions. In other words, if you fight the Home Office, the main witness, the people who have all the documents, who have the system on their side, are the very people who you're up against. So it's their word against yours, and you lose every time. The fight went on for 18 months, during which time we took it to court. I lost the case initially, went to, in total, 3 prisons, spent 5 months in jail. And then in August last summer, the appeal that we had launched against the Home Office action was eventually successful. And on all grounds, the Home Office were found to have breached their remit, breached their own rules, and they were ordered to release me and to grant me residence in the country. And it took 18 months of me not being able to work, me being able to do anything productive in the sense of being part of the society, fighting a Home Office that was intent on trying to bring me down, trying to either jail me or deport me, or both, as turned out to be the case in terms of their attempts for this to come through. The story, in my view, is a story of hope, and it's a story that is a warning to anyone who worries about where civil liberties are going in the current climate. Because I believe that what happens to people who are vulnerable, for example immigrants, is a very good indication of what is likely to happen to the mainstream, to the average member of the population 10, 20, 30 years down the line. Because they always start with the vulnerable and then they move to the centre. And I think it's one of those cases where it is important to stop the rot before it's too late. And I'm very happy to go into the details of various aspects.
It's just a quick question, really. When the police first released you and they threatened you with being arrested again, did they give you any indication what they would charge you with? Well, being in possession of a document isn't supposed to be a crime.
You mean with the immigration offence?
No, I mean with the police. You said the police threatened you. Yeah, when they first released you, that if they found you in possession of this document again or anything similar.
Oh, that document was legally meaningless. It had no meaning whatsoever. It was just their way of sort of putting on a brave face to say, refusing to admit they'd made a mistake. I mean, I could quote you almost verbatim what the document said. It said, you have been found in possession of the Al-Qaeda training manual. This document is not a legitimate part of your research. I mean, my background is science, is engineering, so I think that's what they meant. Nor is it part of your duties as a member of staff at the university. If you were found to be in possession of this document again, you might run the risk of being arrested, which might lead to you being charged, which might lead to you being convicted. Okay. Now, this particular piece, this particular sentence, the first is just a statement of their opinion and what the university told them, which is just a statement of fact. The second bit, which is you might be, is a completely sort of banal sentence that could be said to anyone in this room. If you were found to be found, I mean, of possession of that document, you may be arrested. There's a possibility. It might be a 1% possibility, but it is there. And yes, if you are questioned, you might be charged. And if you go to court and lose the case, you would be convicted. So in that sense, it just means, from a legal point of view, that document was purely serving the purpose of saying, this is our statement. After we've arrested you for 6 days and released you, this is just a document to sort of say what we think about what we did, and just to sort of clarify that we're not sorry we did this.
During your whole incarceration, they never mentioned a specific offence they might charge you with. Say if you're arrested like for murder, then you're going to be charged with murder.
Oh no, there isn't, because possession of that document. I mean, there was an offence called possession, suspicion of instigation. I should remember this. Well, instigation, facilitation, and preparation of terrorist act. I think this is the suspicion. This is the offence. Of course, there was no shred of evidence whatsoever. If anything, my track record was so overwhelmingly the other way that it was almost embarrassing. I mean, the interviews were just surreal, because everything they had was like saying, the Nottingham Peace Movement. And we had me sort of giving talks about, against extremism and so on. So it was just beyond farcical. And we had this. I mean, in my view, I think they realised this very quickly. This is the point. Is they realise this very, very quickly. In a normal state, in a normal situation, I'd rather say, this should have taken 6 minutes, because once you've got a very clear account of what happened, and in my view, very, very sort of convincing, very accurate, very comprehensive account of why I had the document, there was nothing more to be said. Instead, there was a choice of either to release the person or try and find something, anything that would stick. And when I went through this, I obviously became very interested in. I mean, I was before, but I paid particular interest to similar cases that happened before and since. Sorry, and this is almost systematic. Many of you might remember the 12 or 13 Pakistani students who were arrested last year and threatened with deportation. And I don't know if there was a big operation in the Greater Manchester area. And Gordon Brown came on TV and he said, "This is a great, this is a big operation. This is a very important operation to thwart a huge danger," and so on and so forth. All of them were cleared of any involvement in terrorism. Of course, nobody heard about this because, immediately afterwards, they were all put on immigration offences, and a lot of them have been deported, many of them have returned voluntarily after being given no choice. I mean, they're just stuck in the immigration system, in the detention sort of waiting room, and some of them are still fighting. They're still, as we speak, in detention since April last year. Of course, nobody talks about them anymore, but this is the point. It's the cloud of guilt was created because nobody remembers them being released. They just remember them being still embroiled in something. And this is precisely what was trying to, what the attempt was in my case. There was an attempt to say, if we just create enough, that whiff of guilt or suspicion or the fact that there's something not quite right, that would be enough. Because for most people, they say, he might be not really like an extremist or whatever, but there's something dodgy going on there. Like, how come he's still fighting? Whatever. If he was, if he was all clear, then it shouldn't have happened. He should have been released. So I think that was I don't know if I've answered your question.
Yeah, you have. Thank you.
So how did they know that you were in possession of that document?
That's a very good point. Because what happened was, as I said, I was ill that day, and the day before I had been ill all week. I had the flu, which is another problem, because another sort of point to give, which is at no point in my arrest nobody ever said like, are you okay, or do you need any help in terms on that front. But that's fine. I was worried about. We had a particular event for which I was the main person in charge of the day before, which was a school, something called the school away day, and I rang up, and there were some documents on my computer that were relevant to that event, and I told a colleague of mine, these are the documents that you need, and this is how you find them on my computer. And it was very easy to find. They were on the desktop, as well as the manual, which sort of tells you, you'd imagine if somebody was using that document for nefarious reasons, they wouldn't really put it on the desktop of their computer, and they wouldn't tell just anyone to go and log onto their computer in their office and look at that and at any documents on there. So surely that would have been easily a clear indication of at least how worried I was, or not worried about any potential guilt or responsibility. That should have given the game away. But it made no difference, because by that stage, when the picture was sort of formed in the first day, they'd moved from trying to figure out whether I was to be arrested, but how. Whether I was to be convicted, but how. But using what legal means. So that's how they came to discover it, to find the document.
So when you were released for the first time, you were arrested immediately after?
Yeah, literally 5 seconds. People come and gave me that paper. They left the room, then 2 people came in, and then served me with paper saying, we are now holding you.
So it was pretty clear there was a connection between
Oh, no. The way I was held, it seemed to me very clearly that they knew 2-3 days before I was to be released that I was to be rearrested for immigration. Because immigration not the most efficient department in the country. These are people who take millions of years to do anything. For them to have been ready, it's clearly, and this is a point, by the way. People sometimes think this is the normal thing. Somebody is arrested for an immigration offence. It's not a serious offence. Even according to the Home Office, what they allege I did, and this is not many people know this, but what they allege I did, this is the Home Office version of how what a terrible person I am, is that I deliberately refused to renew my visa when I could have. They don't deny and they don't contradict the version of event, which is that I had no reason not to be given. My visa situation was all good in terms of having all the papers and all the reasons to be in the country. I've been here for 13 years. Now 14, but at the time it was 12, 13 years. So the argument according to the Home Office was that I did so just because I wanted to save the £200 visa fee. That was the argument. That's the only reason they could think of, to say, oh, this is why you did it. Because everyone was saying, this is crazy. Even if we believe your version that this guy somehow deliberately didn't renew his visa, it doesn't make any sense for this to be the reason. They knew that I had all the documents I needed to renew it. So they said, this guy opted to just, live illegally and just jeopardise his entire professional and academic career just to save £200, which is, I think, to anyone would be risible, but the stakes were are slightly more serious now. So it's sort of just that, little bit above laughable. So yeah, in that sense, it's if you think about this context, okay, about the nature of the offence, which is very minor. I mean, we're not talking about that. They never alleged that I had forged any documents about anything of the sort, which is the normal immigration offence. The offence they tried to charge me with is the offence normally applicable to somebody who comes in with a passport that's not theirs, that's fake, with a fake name, where they knew exactly what they're doing. Okay, and this is what they tried to. When I never ever used anything other than my passport, which is legitimately issued in this country, where I've been, according to them, legally in this country for at least 10 years. So it's very, very, and for this, they tried to put me on the plane on the first available seat. Now, to put this in context, there's a waiting list for people who have lost all asylum appeals. They've tried everything, okay, to be in the country. They've gone to all the courts, all the legal steps, and they've exhausted everything, all the way to the European Court, and that's it. They know they have to be. Now, on average, they've got to wait a year before there's a place for them on the plane. In fact, when I was in Canterbury Prison, which is where most foreign nationals are taken when they serve sentences, most people's complaints were not about wanting to stay. They had lost their cases. Most people's complaints were about how the Home Office was very slow in getting them out. So most of them were simply calling their Home Office caseworker saying, "Where's my plane? I need to go. I want to go." And then the Home Office would say, "Sorry, we've got a big waiting list. We can't get you on the plane." So if you think about how easy it was for them to just reach a decision and to find me a spot on the plane within a week, and if they could have had me on the plane a week, on the same day, they would have. We know this. So that tells you like the sort of the political motivation behind this.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank you to share your sad experience today with us. But just I want to ask you a question. You said that you understood the plot a week later, that they wanted to deport you. So was the Algerian government aware of that? Because I guess that there are some agreements between those two countries to deport someone.
The Algerian government, I think for them it was just a matter of, as long as the Algerian dimension was...
So as they are waiting someone to get to the Algiers airport, so...
No, for them they didn't want to get involved. It was for them an internal UK matter. I mean, I was Algerian, but to them, it's as long as it's not sort of in the press, talking about the Algerian dimension, it wasn't that problem. I mean, they did make queries. They did try to find out what was happening from the Home Office and from myself. But up to that, it wasn't really there. It was just somebody in another country dealing with a legal situation with the authorities of that country. So, in that sense, it wasn't really their issue. They probably, I don't know if they had any sort of plans for later, but for when I returned back home, if I did. But the idea was for them that it was just an internal UK matter, and I think they just opted to sort of stay out of it.
Can I just ask about? You said you were put in prisons.
Yeah.
Is that not? Are you not supposed to be put in immigration detention?
Oh no, I was in detention, but then when we went to court, and this is the reason I was talking about the difficulty of fighting the Home Office. When I went to court to fight the charge of almost everything had to depend on the witness statements of people working for the Home Office. So, for example, if the Home Office were alleging that there was a problem with my visa, or there's a discrepancy, or there's a latency in application for a visa, then they'd say, and the evidence for this is, and then they bring somebody who's an officer from a civil servant from the Home Office, who would clearly side with the Home Office. They wouldn't. So because of this, I lost the case when he went to court. It was, I mean, with hindsight, there was a lot of naivety on my part, because now, had I done things differently, I would have been a lot less trusting of the motives. Because to me, of the Home Office, to me, I always saw the Home Office as this big bureaucratic machine. I never thought of it as some sort of something that could have almost sort of vindictive tendencies.
Can I ask you about the judge at your bail hearings? Because I'm doing a project at the moment, monitoring judges at bail hearings for exactly this. And there are terrible, terrible stories about the judges.
Well, the judge was not very the judge was clearly sort of, he clearly had an idea, like, he had his mind up about me, like, from the word go. And I think the fact that I was very, in the period leading up to my trial, I made it very clear that I was very upset with the Home Office. I did not go down the route of saying, oh, please let me stay in the country, I'm a nice guy, and so on, that sort of thing, which is sort of what people are expected to play. I was very harsh with the Home Office. I called it draconian, just was very, really sort of on the attack, and made sure that everyone knew about my story. I think they didn't like that at all. They didn't like it one bit, and they thought, well, this is somebody who's asking for it, and he needs to be taught a lesson. But in fact, I think it just backfired eventually, because now I think people sort of have seen the process from the day I was arrested to the day I won my case, and they see, despite all the costs, both financial and human and emotional, they've seen a story with a happy ending in a sense compared to others, and something that inspires them to be a bit more brave in standing up to the Home Office. And there's lots of stories of people who are in similar sort of predicaments, who used to be fairly sort of defeatist about it, and now are sort of thinking maybe we should fight, maybe we should be a bit less fatalist about it. So the judge, in my opinion, I can't, for legal reasons, I'd rather not sort of.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why.
Things sort of ran according to how they were supposed to be run, more or less, within the courtroom.
Yeah, sort of. I was, to me, like to my non-legal mind and eyes, I was looking, and to me a lot of things did not make sense. The directions, the instructions to the jury, the way things were conducted, the way the Home Office people were allowed to sort of, just be the arbiters of what the situation was, even though they were the other party. They were at the same time the main witnesses, and I thought that this is a bit silly. You can't be the people that accuse me of something and then call yourself as witnesses to confirm what you've just accused me of. This is sort of defeating the point. You can't be judge and jury and party to the but that's I think an endemic problem in the system. This is a systemic problem that I think is maybe for people who, legal scholars to pore over.
What sort of legal support did you get?
Thanks for bringing this up, because this is the one thing I haven't mentioned so far, which is the campaign. People need to understand that the entire reason why I'm here today, and not, in another country or God knows where, is precisely because I happen to have the very, very good fortune of knowing a lot of very, very good people on campus and in the community, which is itself to do with the fact that obviously I've been a member of the community for a long time, had been a member of many societies, and indeed founded and was present in many societies, and was on the Students' Union Executive and University Senate, and represented the university in debating and all sorts of things. So I had the good fortune of being very different from the average immigration case profile, which is somebody who knows literally nobody in the country, or knows maybe two people, or one. I knew hundreds. And this made sure that as soon as I was arrested, a big movement started on campus and then beyond, and then it went to the alumni network in the UK, everyone who had met me or dealt with me over the last 10 years, which sort of adds up if you think about it. And even abroad, when I was in detention after the first 2 weeks, I had calls from Ghana and Sri Lanka and America and Canada and other people saying, we just heard, how can we help? And this is the only key difference between my case and others. It's not necessarily that I happen to be legally more right than others. In fact, I think a lot of people who are sometimes, their case is even more clear-cut than mine, still end up on the losing side and still end up being deported, but purely because they haven't got that extra support. And for me, the campaign made the whole difference, because very immediately after I was arrested. Being in detention means I'm not able to do anything. I can't even instruct lawyers. I can't pay for them, certainly, in the sense that I can't manage this sort of affairs from within, when my access to phones and letters and so on is very, very limited. And I've got a week to do all this. When you count the weekends and so on, we're talking hours. The campaign did all this. So people completely voluntarily, completely of their own volition. I didn't ask anyone. In fact, I was informed that there was a campaign that had been formed by people within the campaign. People called me and said, "Do not worry, we're on this. We've got a team, we've got people doing this, we've got phones, we've got contacts with the media, trying to make sure the world knows about this, make sure the solicitors are instructed, and making sure we get the money raised." Because I had legal support. Initially, it wasn't on legal aid. It was just lawyers that were paid for their work. And then also, since I was arrested to this very day, by the way, I'm still unable to work. Legally, I'm not allowed to work, which means that, if you think about it, how am I supposed to fight the state, and how am I supposed to conduct all this over 18 months without having the... So my luck was to have a lot of people who managed to raise, for example, the campaign raised more than £15,000, which is an insane amount if you think about campaigns that are sort of local based. So we're talking about donations that are nobody donated like 10k. It was mostly donations of 10, 15, 20 pounds, sometimes 100. But this all amounted, because of the nature of the campaign, amounted to enough money to sustain me through the 18 months where I was fighting this case. And this is the key difference, I think, between my case and many others. It's not because I happen to be more right, legally speaking, than others, but I think it's because I had I knew the right kind of people, in the sense people who are sort of very civic-minded, very aware of their duties and responsibilities and belonging as citizens. And I think this is the key thing. And I want to make sure this is understood in a positive note. I think this is the key thing in order to move things forward, to try and make sure things are always start from the ground up. It's an incredible achievement, I think, for the campaign to have done what it has done, because it worked on all fronts. They made sure the media narrative was countered, that was being spelled out by the counter-terrorism unit, by the university authorities, which is another topic, and by the local police, and by obviously lots of people who are sort of anti-immigration anyways on there, and who sort of immediately jumped to stereotypes and sort of assumptions about who I was and whether I deserved to be here and so on.